So,
Well,
hello everybody, and welcome to another interview with Students for Political Engagement. Today we have an interview with Marco Coletta, who is a candidate for Regional and Local Councillor in Richmond Hill. So, welcome, Mr. Coletta.
Thank you for letting me be here.
So, to start us off, would you like to give us, a brief introduction of yourself and why you're running to be Regional and Local Councillor?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Marco Coletta. I am running for Regional and Local Council, as was pointed out. I've lived here my whole life. I was born here. I went to school at Crosby Heights, and I went to high school at Major Mackenzie. I went to university at York University for history and political science. I've been involved in politics directly since about 2011 when I volunteered on my first campaign. And I decided to run in Richmond Hill, well, because I am a lifelong resident. And, after about 10, 11 years working strictly federal and provincial politics, I felt that municipal in Richmond Hill was going off the rails. When you've lived here for, 40 years like I have, I've literally seen the town grow up, and I've never seen the town council in such a state. I mean, to see, the level of bickering and police action that's going on council, it's just sad, and it's kind of a horrible reflection of what's going on in our higher level politics. And if we're going to stop that at the higher level, we need to stop it at the local level.
thank you for that answer. And I believe the next question is also from Matthew.
Yes. So, the next question is on transportation. So, obviously, as a city, an important part of our city is efficient transportation. And as a local council, you would have the opportunity to both work at the city level and the regional level to develop our transportation system. So, what would you do to develop and improve Richmond Hill's current transportation system as a regional and local councillor?
Well, if we're looking at our current transportation, it's wildly inadequate to the population we have here, especially when well over 60 to 70% of the population works south of Steeles. So we're talking a population that lives in Toronto, works in Toronto, pardon me. I mean, I myself work all over the GTA currently, so I could be downtown, I could be, in Mississauga, I could be in York Region somewhere. But to be honest, I'm not going to take public transit to get there because it's not reliable. It's as expensive as having a car and not as convenient. If I'm going to change that, first we have to address the fact of the cost. I mean, it's called public transit, yet you pay for it. Let's seriously look at a model like some European countries have, where transit is not a for-profit industry. It is paid through by taxes, and it is run efficiently regardless. So I would start there. Let's have that conversation. If we can just start by lowering the cost and making it more efficient and more responsive, that would be a start. If we're going to look into the future, let's talk seriously about the subway. I don't think the subway, as it's planned right now, that's going into York Center, or Richmond Hill Center, or whatever they want to call it, which is not the center of Richmond Hill, by the way, which is an odd name to call that stop. But if it's going to stop in Richmond Hill, at the very edge of Richmond Hill, that's not going to solve any traffic problems. It's not going to solve any issues of transportation. If we're going to have a serious talk about the future of transit and that subway is going to be part of it, let's talk about it going to Newmarket. Let's talk about it going all the way to the border of Northern York Region. Then we're going to have a serious conversation about alleviating traffic and talking about real transportation needs. The other issue we need to talk about is transportation is not just about funneling people out. We need to create a system and an environment in York Region that builds local business, well-paying businesses to come here instead of Mississauga and instead of Toronto. We cannot just be a group of communities that feed into those two cities. We have a vibrant, well-educated community in the middle of the heartland of Ontario. So let's start using those to attract business here. Let's alleviate traffic and transportation needs that way.
Yes. Thank you for that answer. And I was wondering, just as a follow-up, um, are there any specific policies that you have in mind that would, achieve some of the things that you've mentioned?
So for the direct transit needs, I would like to start seeing a reduction in the cost of transit, especially for Viva. Let's bring that lower than the TTC costs. Let's make it more viable of an option for commuters than just driving. I mean, that's the environmental issue as well, not just a transit issue. If we're going to talk about bringing businesses here, we literally have to have our councillors go out and talk to these businesses, ask them to move here, show them that Richmond Hill and York region is a place that can grow business-wise. We're not just a group of houses.
Thank you. Speaking on just housing and just development in general, so urban development is an important part of city council responsibility. Right now, the lack of housing is an important problem that is facing Richmond Hill as our population grows. On the other hand, the density of housing and adequate services are also a concern of many residents. What is your idea or philosophy on how city council should approach this problem and balance between the two issues without compromising either?
So right now we're in a situation where the provincial government is mandating our growth. And no matter what city council does today, we are being forced to put in, a huge amount of high-rise condos at the intersection at Yonge and 7, Yonge and High Tech. We're talking about not a small amount. We're talking 33 condos, which are going to average between 40 and 80 stories. That could equal up to 60,000 new residents. There is no plan in there for any transit, any recreation, schooling, businesses. In fact, businesses will be wiped out because of that. That's an area where there are, they're not great paying jobs, but they are business jobs in Richmond Hill, which are going to be gone. And there's no plan to replace that. And this is a twofold problem. One, as I said, it is the provinces mandating this, but at the city level, we have been slow to implement development, and that has caused the province to come in. Now, there are plenty of problems as to why that plan is bad, and we can go in and talk about the very suspect issues of who's making money off that development. But we also need to talk about how Richmond Hill, the council, has been afraid to make any development. And I don't think any town or city now as ours can be in a situation where we can't have any development. So now we're stuck between, unsustainable development and no development. So we need someone to come in there, and I think I can be that person who can take a look at this and say, let's have a reasonable amount of development. Let's talk about what that is and where it can go and how we can make it sustainable for our city.
All right, thank you for that answer. And I think going into a bit of the specifics on what you talked about, reasonable development. So just on your philosophy of housing, do you think that you have more support for like more high density housing such as condos, or do you think you might support like more medium density housing?
So I have no preference between the type of housing, so long as the housing that is being proposed and the development that's being proposed includes things like a rent to own for a certain percentage of the new housing. A certain percentage of new condos have to be at least market rental units. So we're talking maybe 10%, 5%. I mean, these are not concrete numbers. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about them with the public. Let's talk about them on council. Let's talk about real issues, not just let's build 60,000 units and forget about how, who's buying them. Because how many of these units are actually going to be bought by people who can afford it? It's going to be, in my mind, going to be a lot of people who are buying secondary properties for rent, or it's going to be a lot of corporations buying for investment opportunities. That's not sustainable development. That's the development I want to oppose. But to say we have to have only houses or we have to have any condos, that's irrelevant to the actual problem of we don't have enough housing in this town and in this region. We need to make sure that there's housing for people who want to buy it. We have to find multiple ways for people to buy it. And if that means that the town has to get involved, the city and the region have to get involved in making these opportunities available to more people, then let's have those conversations. Let's do that. And let's make sure that the region has a real plan for non-market rate low-income housing, because right now there is no real plan.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And I think moving on to our next question, which is about finances. So obviously, as a municipality, the financial health of Richmond Hill is very important for its operations. So what would you do as a regional and local councillor in crafting the budget so that Richmond Hill is on sound financial grounds while at the same time ensuring the same level or improved level of services?
So I would first like to see a complete review of every department, and I'd like to see it independently audited, which from what I've been hearing from some residents has been very difficult to get either the town council, or sorry, pardon me, city council or the departments to agree to an outside auditor. I think that's the first step. I'm not, I'm not a conservative by any measure of my political history. I think if you take a look at that, that's pretty obvious. But I don't want to increase taxes. I want to make sure services are being provided. I want to make sure that what we are spending is done efficiently and properly. I don't want to start, having departments coming back and say, let's increase the budget by X and not have a reason why, not have, anyone telling me what the reason for the current budget is. Let's have a complete look at all of our departments. Let's see if we're wasting money, how we can save money, and then, and only then, do we decide whether or not we increase taxes or lower taxes.
So as a follow-up on that, do you think in the process of crafting the budget that there are any budgetary items that you would look at spending more money on, or budgetary items that you might look at spending less money on?
So I want to see the budget in terms of affordable housing. That is really my major concern. We need to start looking at housing and what we're going to do about it. Now, I don't know what the budget is for affordable housing. Does Richmond Hill itself have an affordability budget? What is it? Let's take a look at that and see if it's actually adequate. Are we handing off the responsibility to the region so we don't have to spend money? These are questions that aren't being really answered by anyone on town council or city. Sorry, pardon me, city council. I keep saying town council. We are a city now. I apologize for that. Other than that, I'm not here to, I don't want to cut and I don't want to raise unless we have to. I fundamentally believe that property taxes are regressive. They overly affect new owners, seniors, and low income owners. That's not a way to run a town or a government. You can't run it based on the idea that everyone pays based on the value of the property. That's completely antithetical to our idea of a progressive tax system. Again, let's take our inspiration from Europe. Why are we not being funded through income tax? Why are we, funding through property taxes, which are based on the market value of the land, of the home? It doesn't really make sense to have, a budget that can fluctuate based on market forces.
All right, thank you for that answer. So our next question is relevant to the environment. So our public parks and green spaces are an important part of Richmond Hill. How would you work to protect and improve the environment of Richmond Hill?
So flat out, I want to say right now that I will support the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Act. I will oppose any change in land status from conservation to multi-use. We cannot, I want to repeat that, cannot allow anyone to weaken the act by transferring land to different uses. So that is a non-starter for me. I will not move on it under any circumstances. In terms of parks and green spaces, absolutely, we need more. If you look at the amount of large sporting facilities in Richmond Hill, we have less now than when I was a kid. We're talking, less baseball diamonds, less soccer fields, and we don't have any spaces for any other large sports, which new immigrant families are coming here, which are not native to Canada. I mean, we have a large and growing South Asian community. Cricket is big in that region of the world. We don't have anything that can really facilitate that, and there are no plans to facilitate that. So we need to look at that. Let's build more of these type of facilities, because our community is only growing, and the need and want for those facilities is going to only increase over time.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And I think our next question is on an important part of the job as a regional and local councillor, which is that as a regional and local councillor, you would also be representing Richmond Hill on York Region Council. So how would you navigate the relationship between Richmond Hill and York Region and ensure that Richmond Hill's interests are represented at York Regional Council?
So I guess it's really how we view ourselves as a city. I kind of view York Region as a whole rather than a separate 9 municipalities in terms of that level. I mean, there is some divide when we're talking about the municipalities south of Bloomington and those of north, but in reality we all have this commonality across the municipalities. Most of our population works in Toronto, works in Mississauga. We all have issues of growth, which is being mandated on us, and we all have the issue that we're not bringing in enough business to counterbalance this growth in residential properties. I don't really think I want to go there and start saying, well, Richmond Hill has to have X, Y, and Z. That's not productive. That when you're in government, you cannot just be someone who only represents a single segment of the community. You have to be there as their voice, yes, but you have to be there as their voice in a chorus of others. And that's what regional council has to be. It has to be about all these municipalities coming together for collective benefit, not for Newmarket, not for Markham, not for Richmond Hill. It has to be more broad than that.
Okay, thank you for that answer.
Thank you. So the next question is something that is pertaining to community safety.
Mm-hmm.
So an important part of a livable community is community safety. How will you, as a councillor, maintain and improve community safety in Richmond Hill?
So if we're talking about actual policing, there has been some high-profile issues in the last couple of weeks. Let's have a conversation about, is our police budget adequate to the safety needs? But let's also have the conversation of, is the police the best answer for every situation? Should we be funding more community-focused safety issues? Should we be focusing more on mental health issues within our communities? Should we be tackling more social services within our communities as a safety measure? Because if we're just going to have the police as the sole arbiters of security, we're not really looking at the actual problem. I mean, this is there's a saying, the saying, if everything looks like a nail, you're going to use a hammer. But not everything is, police focused. Safety is not just police focused. It is a social issue which we have to tackle at many levels. I've seen a lot of councillors coming out recently talking about policing, talking about safety. No one's talking about the social issues which drive this. We have, an invisible population of underwaged, lower income people who, either through a mix of economic problems or psychological problems, are being lost and being lumped in with the safety issue, when we can deal with this in other ways that don't require simple enforcement of laws.
Thank you. So I have a follow-up. So another concern about community safety is not just policing, but it is also like trafficking and having safe environments for transportation to go. So what measures will you do to address community safety in like the and the transport kind of facet?
So I would like to see renovations done to our public spaces and our parks, increasing the lighting. I think that if we're at the hyper local level, we want communities to feel safe that way. So let's increase the lighting in parks so people who use it later at night or who travel at it later at night have that kind of safety issue. Um, in terms of speeding and traffic issues like that, there definitely needs to be more enforcement. I have heard over and over again that the issue of speeding and street racing has become an increased issue, and that's something that we can definitely push at the regional level with the police services. Let's get them to put more monitoring on city roads and those thoroughfare roads like Major Mackenzie, Highway 7, Bayview, Bathurst. Let's have increased presences there. Let's talk about having speeding cameras there. These are issues that we can actually tackle without a major increase in budget. Between lighting and between extra policing on those issues, those are low cost issues that we can tackle.
Thank you. And this brings us to our last question. Oh, never mind. Matthew still has a question.
Yes. Yes. So I think our next question is on something you talked about in your platform a bit, which is some of the democratic reforms that you would like to see happen to the city of Richmond Hill, such as implementing ranked choice voting and election redistricting. So I was wondering if you could sort of expand on your thinking on that a bit and sort of like explain why you think these things should be implemented.
Sure, absolutely. So democratic reform is very close to my belief system. I think right now in Canada as a whole, we are at a democratic deficit. At the municipal level, we should do everything we can to drive more people out to the polls. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have to look at why people aren't voting. A lot of people don't vote, especially in Richmond Hill, because they don't think it matters. Because for a long time, we have the same people over and over and over again in the same positions. And we end up in a situation like this where we have, I don't want to say a corrupt council, but a very dysfunctional council who could all be theoretically reelected. And they're going to be reelected on less than 50% of the vote. I don't think that's right. I really don't think that's right. As much as if I get elected, statistically, it's going to be with less than 50%. That's not right either. That should be changed. Okay. So first of all, that I want to push for. In terms of redistricting, my main thrust was to start having regional councillors assigned actual geographic roles or areas. I think that's a fair thing to do, because if you're going to run for regional council, it is more costly and more difficult than running for MP or MPP, just based on the size of the area you have to cover. Most of the time, if you're not wealthy, if you don't have a lot of financial connections, it is very difficult. What I am doing right now is extremely difficult. I am not wealthy, and the people that I represent are not wealthy either. The donations that I receive are from people who are, maybe they're giving up something for a month to give me, $50, $100. If I was, independently wealthy, if I had developer friends, I could spend $100,000 and completely, outclass anyone else. That's not right. Let's reduce that. I also want to start a conversation on, do we have enough representation in Richmond Hill? I mean, I was born in 1980. We have the same number of councillors as when I was born 42 years ago. I don't know about you, but the town has grown almost 4 times since I was born. So let's start to have that conversation. No one wants to talk about having more politicians, but you still want that representation. And how do you have representation when you don't interact with the people who represent you? I mean, we're talking about 25,000 people per elected representative. That's a lot of people to that you are never going to talk to as a representative, and who you're not going to talk to your representative either. It's strange that we're so afraid to have more politicians to represent your interests, and then we complain about how nothing changes. So I mean, I want to start that conversation. More than just redistricting, I want to talk about financing as well, because as I said, right now it's a lot easier to win if you have money and if you have connections. So let's talk about, adding, limits to how much you can spend. Let's talk about having refunds for people who make donations. Let's talk about a donation matching like they do in the United States. If someone can afford to, put in $1,200 and you can only afford to put in $50, you're many times less influential on what your money's covering. So why don't we help with that? Why don't we give you that money back? Why doesn't the municipality match it so we get more people to come out and get involved? All of these are problems which have caused Richmond Hill Council to become stagnant, and frankly, all municipalities in York Region to become stagnant. I mean, these are conversations that we should be having.
And thank you. So, and this brings us to our last question. So if you were to be elected, what would be the first thing you would do?
So the first thing on my agenda is building a coalition to oppose the MZO, which is going in at Highway 7 and Yonge. I consider that to be a paramount danger to our community, the future of our community, and what exactly we are as a community. So we need to build a coalition of voters, residents, voters, and councillors to talk to the government. Because again, the government can just mandate that this happens. But if we can show them that there's enough opposition to it, we can get them to change it. But that means that we have to have someone who's willing to stand up and say, this is wrong. I'm willing to be the person who brings people together to stand up against that issue. And that is going to be my core issue for the next four years. I want to build that coalition. I want to talk to the provincial government. I want them to change this plan that is going to ruin our community.
And thank you. So thank you for coming here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
And
It is an
yeah,
honor for
thank you for coming here and joining us today, and have a great evening.
The pleasure's mine. You have a great evening too.
All right, thank you very much,
you.
and
Bye.
bye-bye.